Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions is brought to you by Newport-Fersan, Jamaica Limited, the first on the land.
Alright, so it's now time for Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions. Joining us this morning, Melvin Henry, and he's technical manager at Newport-Fersan. He joins us this morning to talk about rebuilding soil life with Bacto Gang, a yield enhancer. Good morning, Melvin, and welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Altia. Good morning to our listeners. I am doing well, and it's a pleasure to be back.
Good to have you on with us. Melvin, I know that tired soils is a term commonly used by farmers as well as other members in and around the agricultural sector, and particularly in a context where crop performance is being discussed. And I think from the hint in the topic, we will be diving into what exactly is happening with our soils today. And I know that this is your baby. You're all at Newport-Fersan. And so I want to really take a look this morning at a response to our current realities, because nature has been changing around us. Am I on point? You're quite
on point here, Altia. The reality is that agriculture, crop production has been around for as long as human existed. But as you rightly mentioned, there are a lot of things that have been changing as time progresses. So many of our soils today, despite the fact that they might be loaded with nutrients, which is considered a chemical property of the soil, the soil as well might have a very good texture, meaning that it allows drainage as well as moisture retention for crop growth, which is a physical component. But oftentimes, the missing component, which actually limits our outcome, or yield, or crop performance, is actually that biological component. So the physical is okay, the chemical component is okay, but we look at the biological part, the life within the soil that aids and assists the plant to thrive. That component is oftentimes compromised. It is actually true that the performance of a crop there's no escaping it. It is directly linked to the condition within our root environment. And it therefore means physical, chemical, and the biological component, which we'll be diving into this morning, needs to be in a state that facilitates excellent and healthy crop growth, plant growth, and ultimately the type of yields that we're looking for, we will be able to see them. So when farmers make reference to tired soils, the soils are tired or they're becoming tired, they're actually speaking to what they're observing, a combination of factors. The first one is what I'd refer to as a chemical fatigue, meaning that you're applying fertilizers, but you're having a weaker response than before. So if some farmers were to do the comparison now compared to 10, 15 years ago, they're realizing that even with increased application of fertilizer in terms of quantity, pounds per acre or kilograms per hectare, whatever unit, you're realizing that the response, the crop response, is weaker than before. Secondly, nutrients are oftentimes present but they are not available, so they're unavailable. So it's like you're standing beside a vault with millions of dollars, but you don't know the combination to open it. And as a result of that, that money doesn't benefit you. And that is also a chemical fatigue, and that's a situation that exists. We also have situations where there are a lot of micronutrient deficiencies showing up. So you start to see discoloration on the leaves of the plant, which should not be there. And once you're seeing those, it simply means that it is going to trigger a reduction in your yield. Then we move to what we call the physical fatigue. This is something, again, depending on where you are. It is observed by our farmers. You're seeing soils become harder. The soils harden at a faster rate, even after some amount of tillage. That's an indication that something is off. You also have situations where water, you tend to have, during a rainfall, you tend to have a higher portion or percentage of that water moving across the surface of the soil rather than infiltrating, entering the soil itself. And that's the only way it's going to benefit you when it enters. And this, again, is attributed to that physical fatigue. You also have shallow roots. When farmers are removing plants, if a lot of our farmers look carefully when they're removing, for example, after a sweet pepper crop, hot pepper crop, tomato crop, if you look at the area in which the roots actually extend, you realize that there's a lot of restriction. They have not gone far, and as a result of that, that also dictates how well the plant is nourished. Now, the hidden one, which we're going to look at this morning, which a lot of conversation is not had about it, is a biological fatigue, which means that the life forms within the soil, we're having fewer beneficial organisms, microorganisms. And I said the hidden ones because oftentimes, these are microscopic, so you'll not see them with the naked eye, but you'll definitely see their impact in how they help the entire soil to feed the plant. So you have situations where you have crop decline even halfway between the normal production cycle. So you start to see a decent crop. After a couple of harvests, you start to see reduction, significant reduction in the size of your produce and the quality of your produce. These are actually signs of biological fatigue that the plant is actually experiencing. And so we want to have a discussion this morning where we look at that component and how is it that together farmers and our technical team here at Newport-Fersan can help to reverse or address this component so we can return to consistent productive ways.
There are a couple of things that are playing in my mind as I listen to you talking there, Melvin. One is soil tilth, which is really the physical condition of soil in relation to its suitability for planting, cultivation, and supporting root growth. And the other thing that I think about is soil testing. How important are these two components?
Well, very important, as you would imagine. The soil testing gives us a lot of information for decision making. And I say that because oftentimes there are decisions being made without having the sort of a data to make a proper decision. And the net result oftentimes, more than we'd like, is actually failure. You imagine going to a doctor with a complaint and without ordering or commissioning a couple tests to give an indication as to what might be happening within the system. That doctor proceed to just making random recommendations. Whatever the outcome is, so be it, is that sort of an approach. And where agriculture is concerned, our farmers are in it as a business, and as such, the soil testing is really the foundation that empowers us as support systems, as technicians, to guide the farmer in what needs to be done, when it should be done, in what sort of a volume, to ensure that the ultimate goal, which is to make the plant as comfortable as possible so it can thrive and produce, and that's the way you're going to make return on your investment. So those are critical components that must be addressed, and the soil test is actually that foundation from which we build up.
And indeed, as I mentioned, the soil tilth, all of that as well can help in terms of having good soil tilth.
Absolutely. Because oftentimes when for example, when we do a soil test, there's a parameter that comes back on it that is referred to as the CEC, cation exchange capacity.
Right.
It is really a measure of how well the soil is able to hold those nutrients that have what we call a positive charge. So calcium, magnesium, potassium are some of the examples. Now, it is also scientifically established that we can use that number to determine whether or not the soil that we're working with is sandy, loamy, or clay in nature. The higher that number is, meaning the CEC is high, so let's say we're seeing a CEC of 30, it simply means that the clay content within that soil is very high, and that soil will be able to hold a lot more nutrient compared to one that might be 9. That's an indication that it's sandier in nature, and you'll tend to lose nutrient at a faster rate. And as a result of that, that guides us in terms of the management practices that we'll advise the farmers. For example, a sandier soil, the farmer will need to apply lower volumes of nutrient at a higher frequency, because the soil will not retain a lot of those nutrients for plant use. So you need to be in at a frequent rate at lower dosage compared to clay, where your volumes could be a bit higher and your frequency less than with the sandier soil. So those information are very critical information for us to get going.
All right. Melvin, we're on the break, so I'm going to clear the commercials. When we come back, you're going to guide us through exactly what is Bacto Gang and why is it that it's considered relevant and important in today's agriculture. And of course, there's more that we want to discuss with you as well. Let's take the break.
Miss Betty, early blight take over my tomato. And we paper full of powdery mildew. What me I go do?
Clear way.
Oh, you are tell me fi clear way. What do you think me and your friend?
No, Mas Kelso. May I tell you to use Clearway from Newport-Fersan, Jamaica. It is a contact and systemic fungicide with protective and curative actions against a wide range of fungal diseases such as anthracnose and early blight in tomato, purple blotch in onion, late blight in potato, leaf spot in peanut, powdery mildew in pepper, and much more.
Thanks, Miss Betty. You're really my friend. Me call me Newport-Fersan rep right now. Can't forget that name there. Clearway.
Clearway. Farmers, get your supply today. Another premium product from Newport-Fersan Jamaica Limited.
We are inside the feature Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions. And this morning we're taking a look at rebuilding soil life with Bacto Gang, a yield enhancer. We've gone through, though, with Melvin Henry. Very important is some of the issues that confront farmers these days in relation to soil health. And so as we come back from the break, my first question for Melvin is, what exactly is Bacto Gang, sir?
Bacto Gang. Okay, so Bacto Gang is a liquid product that contains a consortium, a team of beneficial, naturally occurring soil bacteria. Mm-hmm. Right? So we're familiar with the word gang in Jamaica for sure, but this in a good way. And I say that because oftentimes when a farmer, or not just a farmer, persons hear about bacteria, the first thing comes to mind is something negative. And indeed, there are some bacteria that are actually disease-causing bacteria. The reality, however, is that within the soil, in excess of 90% of the bacteria that exist naturally are actually beneficial bacteria. Right? So it is this liquid combination of 24 different strains of beneficial bacteria that is applied to the soil around the plant roots. It must be noted that it is not a fertilizer and it is not a pesticide. Instead, what it does is that it works within the root zone where the plant actually feeds, aiding the plant in actually accessing nutrients. So what it does when it is applied is that the bacteria move into the root zone. They then attach to the plant roots within the soil surface as well. They establish a population through multiplication because they actually reproduce. So you would have an increase in the population. and they begin helping the plant and interact with the soil through various activities, which I'll get into just now. So you imagine, Altia, you have a construction, we have a construction site, and it is in need of different, what you'd call skill groups, for want of a better word. You need masons, you need guys to be doing steel work. At some point, you're going to need electrician, plumber, tiler, painter, you name it. This product is actually a combination of different bacteria having different roles and functions, all in a quest to ensure that the plant is actually in a healthy state. So, Bacto Gang, the first thing that it does is that it unlocks nutrients that are already within the soil. And we used the example earlier about the vault. You have the money beside you, but you don't know the combination code. This is what Bacto Gang does. It releases the nutrients that are bound, so the plant, they are liberated and the plant can access them. The second thing that it does is improve fertilizer efficiency. And I want to ensure that I explain this one very carefully. I'm going to use an example. Urea is a fertilizer that most of our farmers, all of our farmers know. That big white green, 46% nitrogen, is on the bag. Now, when we apply nitrogen to the soil, the plant, urea to the soil, the plant cannot use urea as it is in that state. The urea must first be converted to ammonia. And this is done, interestingly, by an enzyme that is produced by one of these bacteria. All right? So the bacteria produce the enzyme that works on urea and converts urea into ammonia. Ammonia is a form of nitrogen, but still not a form that the plant can use. So it therefore needs to go through another transformation, another change process. This is where another set of bacteria produces enzymes that convert ammonia to nitrite. That's another form. Unfortunately, the nitrite, which is a form of nitrogen, is still not usable by the plant. It requires another set of bacteria to transform it from nitrite into nitrate. Now, nitrate is that form. It's one of those forms that the plant actually utilizes. So imagine applying urea, but you have a soil that the population of these bacteria is low or nil. It simply means that your plant will not be able to access nitrogen to correct a problem that you probably observe. So you could probably see your older leaves, which is a general symptom, starting to become yellow. And yes, the conclusion could be correct that it's a nitrogen deficiency. You apply urea, but because there is the absence or the low population of these microorganisms, these bacteria, you do not have the conversion taking place. So the applied urea makes absolutely no beneficial contribution to the plant because these organisms are not existing in a very decent population. And that is where Bacto Gang comes in. It ensures that the bacteria required for those conversions is actually present to assist the plant. It stimulates feeder roots. So that is one of the things that the Bacto Gang does. So your feeder roots are always growing profusely. And as a result of that, your plant will be able to abstract nutrient and water from the soil, and you'll see the net result in growth and performance of the crop. It helps plants to recover from transplant shock, and that is something that is common because oftentimes there is this downtime for the plant to become acclimatized from a tree or the nursery to being planted in the field. And this is one of the realities that oftentimes the assistance from the bacteria is absent, and you tend to have that steep recovery shock. And you oftentimes see plants becoming defoliated. The leaves fall, and sometimes just the stem standing there. This is part and parcel of the problem. And it also improves the tolerance to drought and other drought stress. Again, because you're having a more active root zone that is viable, growing and thriving well, you're definitely going to see your crop performing better, and ultimately your yields would also be improved.
All right, so clearly designed then to help our farmers get into recovery and ensuring that they have better crops. So now, why is it considered relevant and extremely important in today's agricultural system more than ever, Melvin?
The reality is that over time, from creation to now, and forgive me if I mess this up, but I think in Exodus 23, in the earlier part, there was actually a guide given as it relates to land use. You use the land for 6 years, and the 7th year, the land is left fallow. You do nothing with the land. But because of changes in time, population, land tenancy, and stuff like those, there's always this continuous use of the land. So there's no fallow period. Oftentimes, farmers, the absence of crop rotation, all of those are stressors. They are factors that leads to our lands or soils becoming depleted in terms of the life form, the living component of the soil. There are also situations where, and that is why we have precise nutrient management as our flagship, because the excessive and the unjustified use of fertilizer as well can be deleterious or detrimental to or microorganisms in population. And that is why, like you started out the program by asking about soil testing, because more doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a better position. It could actually make your situation worse. So when we do a soil test, for example, and we determine that, let's say, phosphorus levels are adequate or high, there's absolutely no need for you to apply phosphorus. And that is why we would have done so much work in this regard to ensure that farmers are actually applying based on need versus following a traditional practice that is heavily entrenched in our agricultural sector. So frequent tillage is also another factor that stresses the soil, because with frequent tillage, what we're doing is that you're exposing organic matter, and sometimes it is very limited based on the results that we're seeing, to actually break down at a faster rate. Because when you till the soil, you enable a lot of oxygen to enter. Oxygen is like fuel to the fire. So you have your organic matter breaking down at a rapid rate. And without that being replenished, or by some of our practices, clearing the land, removing the organic material, then it simply means that oftentimes, like we're seeing now, organic matter are sometimes even southwards, lower than 2%. What that means is that there's nothing there to sustain the biological life form. So the bacteria cannot survive in conditions like those. Again, the heavy use of pesticides, whichever the classification, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, also have their contribution to how the life forms within the soils are affected in a negative way. All right. Climatic stressors. We're having higher temperatures, irregular rainfall, drought periods, intense downpours. So when you have, for example, high temperatures, that is one of the things that is known, very high temperatures are known to be adverse with the survival of most of our beneficial bacteria. Irregular rainfall, again, makes that situation worse, because they require a thin film, at least, of moisture on the soil particles for them to move about and replicate. So the combination of these factors out here makes the relevance, makes for the relevance of this product in trying to remedy a situation that has, in some parts, depend on where you are, depend on the conditions, very bad, marginal, that sort of a thing. But we do have serious concerns, and they are playing out in how our crops are performing. And Bacto Gang is actually here. This team is actually here. This team of bacteria is actually here in liquid form to help repair some of the breach to our soils.
All right, and when we come back from the break, we will take a look at issues such as the method of application, dosage rate, and how often you should be using the product. So we're into the final segment of the program for today. Melvin Henry, Technical Manager, Newport-Fersan, is with us. This is Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions. And Melvin has been talking to us about soil health and how the use of Bacto Gang can ensure farmers that you are making the most out of your soil, getting the most out of it. And so, Melvin, I want to, and I suspect you're going to have to do a part 2 on Bacto Gang. But I want to touch on those solutions with the practical application guide that you have. What are some of the key pointers relating to the actual use of Bacto Gang, the soil life rebuilder? I want you to touch on method of application, dosage rate, and how frequently the farmer should be using the product.
Okay, so those are very critical, crucial points to note. So the method of application, I normally stress this because oftentimes our farmers are practitioners, and there are times when they tend to modify what is recommended, do their own thing in simple terms. But I'm going to give the recommended method of application and also speak to one possible way that some persons might explore and why it is not advisable. So the method of application, we're actually targeting the soil. So it's a no-brainer. We need to get the product within the root zone of the plant. Whether it's via your good, it can be run through your fertigation, your irrigation system. It can be applied as a drench, meaning if it is that you have probably just a backyard scenario, it is something that you can easily mix within an knapsack sprayer and apply to the root zone, directly to the root zone of the plant. We normally recommend that there is what we call a pre-plant dip, where you actually inoculate the root zone. So you could have a situation where you actually dip the trays ahead of planting. So you're actually introducing the bacteria to the root zone of the plant before transferring to the field. And what you'll notice that in terms of the shock that the plant will undergo, you'll actually eliminate or reduce significantly your previous experiences. So that's the method of application. You drip, drench. The temptation might be for some persons to do a foliar application. But like I mentioned earlier, bacteria survive within a particular environment. For example, temperature ranging from between 20 and 35 degrees Celsius. Lower than 20, their activity is reduced. We're not going to experience much of that here. But higher than that, you're actually going to destroy them. So if you do a foliar application within a few, depending on the intensity of the heat and also wind speed, which causes drying, within a few, you're going to leave that bacteria stranded without moisture on the foliage or the shoot of the plant. So that is something that is a no-no and not recommended. In terms of dose rate, the recommended rate is 500 ml. 500 milliliters or half a liter per acre. All right. I would normally recommend that you put this, for example, in 200 liters of water, and you set about your business to do application. The frequency of application is, the recommended frequency of application is once per month. So we're talking about 500 ml every month per acre. That way, what we're actually doing is ensuring that we are, because after each application, there's going to be a situation where the population will increase, they will reproduce. The population will increase. They will also experience stressors. What you're doing with this frequency is actually ensuring that whatever stressors that could have affected probably a component of that population, you're actually keeping that sustained by replenishing on a monthly interval. So that's pretty much in terms of the method of application, the dosage rate, and the frequency of application.
All right. Any specific field conditions which must be met or observed when you're applying the Bacto Gang to rebuild soil life?
Very, very good question and a very good point here, because we must remember that we're talking about a consortium, a team of living organisms. As a result of that, moisture is essentially critical. So this product should not be applied in dry soil, neither should it be applied in waterlogged areas, because both are adverse to the survival of the organism. So they need a thin film, as I said, of moisture around the soil particles and the roots. So the best to be applied before irrigation or after, before irrigation or rainfall. So that's one. Secondly, it should be applied near the root zone. And by now, our farmers are very versed at that. So whether it's a transplant drench, it's the drip irrigation or soil band around plants, this is something that is recommended. And again, we say you should never apply as a foliar means, and we explained why. You should also apply direct ultraviolet sun exposure because this quickly exposes the organism. So we therefore recommend that in application it is done late evening or late afternoon, or if it is that you have a cloudy day, it can be applied, because the organisms will migrate to where they find safety and they're able to offer service to you. It is also important to avoid the use of strong chemicals, at least within 3 to 5 days after. So we're talking about those copper-based fungicide, anything that is bactericidal in nature, even chlorinated irrigation water could be a problem. So high levels of chlorine. So if you're using that sort of a water, you're talking about at least 24 to 48 hours after.
Wow.
And it is something that we actually don't recommend the use of chlorinated water. If it is that you're forced to use that source, we normally recommend that you catch that water in some container that is open. Chlorine by its very nature is going to fizz off if agitated frequently. So the concentration will become less, to negligible amount, but it should not be fresh from source applying to the soils, and we'll talk about that some other time in terms of how it actually destroys the structure.
Definitely, because I'm almost entirely out of time. I understand the star viruside is back in stock, so farmers can have access to that. And I hear, Melvin, as well, that you're going to be doing some heavy soil sampling focus in the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine during this week. You're actually doing that this week?
Yes, actually started yesterday, and it continues today until Friday. What we're trying to do is actually ensure that our farmers are well aware that we're within the space. So if it is that you need to subscribe, you need to get your soil tested. The turnaround time, because we're having that sort of a focus, becomes shorter. And we encourage our farmers to reach out to us at Newport-Fersan, and we will be there to collect your sample.
All right, have to go. But thank you so very much, Melvin. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Althea. Always a pleasure.
All right, take care. Take a quick word from our sponsors, and then we're wrapping the show.
Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions was brought to you by Newport-Fersan Jamaica Limited, the first on the land.